And I remember standing up in a meeting in the interagency and screaming at them saying, read the newspaper. These guys have just invaded Crimea. Why are we going to close bases in Europe? It's going to be harder, and Trump wants to land on the side that's the winner. And so he's playing both. He's playing both sides. History has shown that that kind of assumption, the war will be over by Christmas, has always proven wrong, always.
Welcome to Independence Avenue Media. I'm Glenn Cates, and I'm really happy to be joined today by Jim Townsend, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO. Jim, thanks so much for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great. So, Jim, I want to start with the war in Iran. It's been 5 months now. President Trump has said that both the Strait of Hormuz must be open to traffic and that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. Iran has said no way. It insists on opening a toll in the strait, on implementing a toll in the strait. It also says it will not give up what it calls its civilian nuclear program. Is there a sign that something is going to give on either side?
Well, I would say the only sign that I can determine from all this is just the ticking clock that Trump has in terms of the midterms. I mean, if there's anyone who needs to disengage and get this behind him, it's Trump. So I think he's probably got the weaker hand to play here, as much as he thinks he doesn't. But we're not in a military war here. This is something else, and his cards are weak unless he decides to put troops on the ground and make this a real big war, and we don't even want to go into that. So I think it's really Trump that has got a clock ticking and a motivation to try to get to the table. I think the Iranians recognize that, and they are happy to sit tight.
And on that point, the New York Times wrote last week that the U.S. They wrote that many of their allies think the U.S. is headed for a strategic defeat in Iran. Do you agree with that assessment?
If we were to leave and leave the Iranian nuclear capability totally destroyed and off the table, which it's not right now, if we could leave the situation with the Straits of Hormuz back to where they were, where it was free passage, and so we could emerge from that with at least the nuclear threat being gone, and the Straits not impacted, then you could say, well, there's a strategic victory there because we were able to eliminate that nuclear threat, which everyone agreed to as being something that we had to live under. But right now, in terms of disengaging, I don't see a lot that we're going to gain, and in fact, we'll be worse off if the Straits of Hormuz are totally in the throes of the Iranians and Oman, and they're exacting a toll, and there's still interference. Then I think strategically we leave empty-handed.
Well, let me ask you, how do you think the U.S. does extract itself from this situation? You mentioned Trump wants to get this over with before the midterms. What do you see realistically in the way of U.S. extracting itself from this situation?
Well, if he wants to get out before the midterms, he's got to get back to the table. He's got to get back, unfortunately, to that very flawed MOU, and somehow come up with an approach where we've got to be able to get something from those discussions and that MOU that could be seen as a victory. Maybe it's the fate of their uranium that they have. Maybe it's the fate of the future of their nuclear capability. Maybe it's the IAEA getting back in. There's some things on the nuclear side that maybe they could get some agreement. Like the JCPOA, maybe they can get something like that, and then say, all right, we've gained our strategic goal, and then they leave, but the straits are going to have to be worked out between Oman and Iran and the Gulfies, and they're working on that themselves now. I think they're washing their hands of Washington. So will the rest of the world define that as a victory and worth the deaths and worth the money being spent? Probably not. They're going to say you went in there and you did something and you paid a price for something far more than you should have and far more than what the JCPOA, and it will not be looked on as a great crowning achievement. But if he wants to get out and claim some kind of victory, it had to be something along those lines. In terms of meeting a deadline, that's the midterm elections. That'd be the only way. I can't see another way out.
So one of the results of the Iran war is that some of the long-running problems of U.S. munitions productions have come to the fore. And one of the most pressing problems right now is that of Patriot interceptor missiles. Ukraine, whose cities are under constant attack by Russian ballistic missiles, desperately need these. And there are fewer now than there were a few months ago. And I guess my first question is, how did Washington get to this position strategically, even before the war, where critical munitions could be so quickly depleted?
Well, that's a really great question that goes back to how the Pentagon and the strategists, how they felt or the future war might look like that we would get involved in.
Mhm.
A war of attrition, a war where mass was important, a war that does not look like the Ukraine-Russia war, but is sharp and fast. It looks more like Baghdad, Desert Storm. It looks like I think in the mind of folks going back decades, the idea was that we don't need to have large ammunition stocks. We're going to have shock and awe. It's going to be over fast. It'll be a high tech kind of thing where having a technological edge will buy us a lot in terms of damaging the other side. So the idea, and these missiles that were developed for this kind of scenario were very expensive anyway. So the idea of having a wartime stock that would be huge, that you would need in a war of attrition, just wasn't affordable, A, and B, they didn't think it was needed. They drew lessons from the various conflicts, like Desert Storm. There wasn't an adversary that we would not be able to defeat pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And so you don't need a lot of the stocks. Well, that was a faulty assumption, and I just history has shown that that kind of assumption, the war will be over by Christmas, has always proven wrong, always. And when I was in the Pentagon, I remember talking to the strategists who were trying to pull equipment and stuff out of Europe. This was during the Obama days. I was the deputy secretary. They were trying to save money. They wanted to pull out of Europe. This was before Crimea. And they said, look, we don't need those there. We've got what we need, here in the U.S., et cetera, et cetera. And I kept saying, we don't have, and the Europeans don't have the mass to deal with a large Russian, and they're saying that's not what's going to happen. So I heard them. And so to get to your question, what we're seeing today was set in motion many years ago by both administrations.
Mhm.
And so uh, we found ourselves not in a big war that took all of our munitions. We found ourselves in these little spats that weren't even necessarily our wars. Iran versus Israel, for instance, dealing with the Houthis, giving Patriots to Ukraine. So it wasn't like we used up all of our munitions fighting an aggressor against the United States. We were dealing with wars that involved us, that impacted us, but that we weren't the main protagonist. And so that bled us dry. So, death by 1,000 cuts. So by the time we actually are in a war that we started with Israel against Iran, we went into that war not ready for anything long term. We went in with whatever was left over from these smaller wars, and where we were not able to quickly replace what was spent over the past few years. And so the logisticians and others, I am sure, knew that there would be trouble in terms of how quickly you could fill back your ammunition bunkers. They must have known that, but I don't think the political people, and I don't think the budgeteers, and I don't think the strategists felt that that was a priority. Then the money needed to go somewhere else. Again, because if we ever needed to use these weapons, it'd be really fast. But we used them up bit by bit by bit, and when it was time to turn to with the Iranians, we weren't ready because of that.
So, I mean, obviously now we're in this situation that we're in, and President Zelenskyy has been frantically asking allies and partners for months for more Patriots, but has so far not been successful, it seems, even within the confines of the Pearl program. Is this a situation where the Trump administration and even allies who have some of these Patriots, but not many, have decided that right now they just don't have the resources to spare, even for the country that's holding that defensive line in Europe?
Well, I think that's right. The Europeans traditionally have not had large ammunition bunkers. They have run out of ammunition in critical times, like during the Libya operation, when the Allies ran out of munitions. Others have been very short. You can imagine you're a smaller ally. It's in the peaceful 1990s, early 2000s. There's no threat on the horizon. How can you go to your parliament and say, "I need billions to buy ammunition"? And they'll go, "Well, what's the threat?" And they'll go, "Well, we don't know, but we might need it." And they're not going to get money for that. And so they've had very small bunkers to begin with. And then the expectation was that if something happened, that the U.S. would be able to resupply them, as we have done in the past, like with the Libya operation. But then we began to give ours to Ukraine and then the Houthis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now we can't provide them some resupply. And we've told them that. We said our priority is going to have to be refilling our bunkers. You're on your own. And on top of that, they now see, and they're right about this, a very real threat at some point from the Russians. And so they could give more Patriots to Ukraine. And as you point out, and it's very true, this is also helping to keep the Russians at bay. But they don't want to be left with nothing should something happen in 2 years. And we know that deliveries of Patriots take a long time. And in years. And so they're going to hold on to what they have. They have upgraded the SAMP-T, which is the Italian-French version of Patriot. It's more capable. Deliveries are going to start to Ukraine, and that might help fill the gap. But I don't see new missiles, frankly, coming from anybody's arsenals anytime soon.
So just sticking with Europe here, at the same time, the U.S. is conducting a force posture review in Europe. It seems like Undersecretary of War Colby is leading that charge. What do you think? What do you think comes at the end of that force posture review?
It's a great question. No one knows. And it's going to be a 6-month review. It'll be conducted by the European Command to begin with, General Grinkevich. And he will look at military necessity, the U.S. military necessity in Europe. What militarily does he feel the U.S. needs to have in Europe? And so he'll make a recommendation based on that. And it'll be based on the Russia threat, no matter what the White House thinks. If EUCOM says, this is a valid threat, they're going to plan for that. They're going to what the first draft of this is military advice. They're going to give military advice to the Joint Staff, to the chairman, and say, we here in the combatant command at EUCOM, this is what we feel we need, and this is what we feel we can move out, and this is the ramifications of that. And here are some of the allies that could fill those gaps. And I mean, there'll be a lot of analysis that's going to go into it. Then that is going to enter into the political side of this. The chairman will have to make a decision himself on, do I just pass this military advice on whole cloth? Maybe he'll tweak it based on what the planners and others in the Pentagon think, in the Joint Staff. But at some point they'll be ready to go, and he'll have to move it up to the political side of the Pentagon. OSD policy, Bridge Colby will want to see that before it goes to the SecDef. And then I'm sure there will be some table pounding meetings I would hope they're table pounding. I don't want the military just to take it. But if Bridge comes in and puts the political spin on this and says, no, we need this and this and this in the Pacific, or the president doesn't like Germany, we want to pull this out of Germany, we don't want to keep it there. Who knows what he's going to say? Poland, we want to give them their 5,000, and it's going to come from Germany. He's going to put the political spin on it, and then then it'll become a political document, and it'll go to the secretary. And he'll have to then figure out what he wants to give to the president, because he's going to have his own, view. And then once he puts that in there, whatever it might look like, it'll go to the president, and there's going to be meetings and a decision. And I believe there will be cuts made more for political reasons than for military reasons. That's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, well, it seems like what you're saying is that there's this official force posture review, but in some sense, on the political side, a decision in some sense has already been made.
I would say on the political side, there could be decisions already made, or at least points of view made by the president and others on what they want to see.
Yeah.
And that's where Bridge is going to have to say, well, the military is saying this. We know the president has talked about this.
Right.
The military doesn't like that, but we're going to put that in there because that's what the president wants, and he's the commander in chief.
Just moving back to Ukraine really quickly. So U.S. Special Envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are expected to visit this month for the first time after having visited Moscow on multiple occasions. What's the significance of this trip? What does it mean for sort of the thought of a renewal of Washington-led peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think this is also something that has a ticking time clock to it too, including the midterms, but also the presidential elections too. I think the Republicans, particularly Trump individually, they want to win here. They want to be able to claim that they brought peace to Ukraine, Russia, whatever that might look like. They want to claim that. So I think this team coming in is going to be facing something different than what they saw last year or year before last. They're going to face a Ukraine that's feeling pretty good about where it is, what it's been able to do. They're going to feel pretty good about European support. And they are going to be less susceptible to pressure to give up things to Russia, given where they are, particularly vis-a-vis Crimea, that they've pretty much cut off in terms of resupply and that type of thing. So they're going to see Putin, who is going to be very sensitive about this idea that he's not doing as well as he was, very sensitive about the losses that he's taking, very sensitive about the strikes that have happened in Russia that have dealt big blows to their energy sector. And so he is going to find himself in a place where he's not going to want to admit defeat. He doesn't necessarily see victory within his grasp. Maybe he does, but for sure, he does not look as invulnerable as he was a year or so ago. So the situation at the table is going to be different. Witkoff and Jared Kushner, I think their original goal was to twist Zelensky's arm so that he gives up stuff in the Donbas, and that allows Putin to say, I've got a victory here, and to pull out. If that's enough for Putin, to claim a victory. It sounds like Iran, doesn't it? But I think right now that kind of tactic isn't going to work. Zelenskyy is no way he's going to sit there and give things up based on how he feels in terms of his ability to deal with the Russians on the battlefield and where he's going in terms of strikes. So I think they're gonna find themselves once again with partners who are not willing to negotiate, partners who are in different places than where they were. And the tactics that that Witkoff and company might have used a year or two ago aren't going to be effective. And so I'm not expecting to see a lot to come out of this, unless, in fact, Putin is feeling such pain that he's looking for a way out. And I haven't seen necessarily something convincing that that's where he is.
Now, obviously, in the past negotiations, both Witkoff and Kushner have been accused of sort of twisting Zelensky's arm more than the other side. I mean, is there more the U.S. could be doing? And do you think Trump has now sort of changed course a little bit and is willing to put more pressure on Russia?
Well, there's a great debate about that, and I'm not sure Trump himself knows.
Yeah.
But we do know that there's legislation getting ready to come out of the Congress on a really tough sanctions package against Russia. So will that in and of itself, show Putin that his friend in the White House maybe isn't going to be so helpful to him as he might have been a year or two ago to try to bring Zelensky along? I mean, if the president signs off on that legislation, then that's certainly a message to Putin. And how long it'll take the pain from that to manifest itself to Putin, I don't know. But it's going to be added to the pile of problems that Putin's going to have to deal with. But it has been it has been apparent that Trump has been impressed with what Zelensky and his people have been able to do with the drones and on the battlefield. And as we know, Trump likes a winner. He doesn't want to be associated with a loser.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what Trump's mindset is on this. He's walked away from the Patriot the Patriot deal, so to speak. He has held up $400 million, I think, in terms of assistance. So he's still being obstructionist, and it could very well have been a phone call from Putin that turned off that Patriot deal. I don't know, but so there's still he's trying to play both sides now. It's not as easy as it was where he said it's all about Zelensky. I'm going to humiliate him in the White House. I'm going to kick his butt and we'll go to Alaska and we'll do a sweet deal with Russia. We're getting Russian business. Those days are over. It's going to be harder, and Trump wants to land on the side that's the winner, and so he's playing both. He's playing both sides.
All right. So just final topic, but obviously related. We're approaching the 18th anniversary of Russia's invasion of Georgia. And you served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Europe and NATO during the Obama administration, which followed soon after that war. I wanted to ask, did U.S. and its European allies make a mistake by returning too quickly to business as usual with Russia after the war?
Absolutely. Absolutely right. I think the seed was planted in the Bucharest summit in 2008 when we put that language in to the communique that said Georgia and Ukraine will be members of NATO. We know that they've been getting messages from Putin, don't do that. It's my big red line, et cetera, et cetera. George W. Bush said, you cannot tell us what we can and cannot do. If they want to join NATO, it's up to them. To me, that's where the seeds were planted. And then, as you know, a few months later, he invades Georgia. And the response, and that invasion happened in the seam of the election of Obama. So when it happened, George W. Bush was the president. There was not the response that should have been made, and why I don't know. But we were in a financial crisis. We know that, so Obama took it on, and his approach was not a finger in the chest to Putin. His approach was the Russia reset. We had the spectacle of Hillary Clinton with the red button with Lavrov that said something other than reset, and so off we went, trying to get at Russia from another direction instead of a shove. It was another direction. When I came in at that time as the Deputy Assistant Secretary, I did not need to get a message about where Russia was going, and for me in my office. We went to general quarters the day I arrived after I got my clearance and I got into the office, my old office when I was a civil servant.
Yeah.
Went in there and said, we've got to be watching Putin carefully. And at NATO, I was talking about what are we doing here? We've got to deal with this guy stuff that happened at the Wales summit, where we NATO became a war fighting alliance once again. That whole, for me, and trying to stop the pulling out of U.S. forces from Europe. In 2014, when Russia went into Ukraine, we were in the middle of pulling forces out. And I remember standing up in a meeting in the interagency and screaming at them, saying, read the newspaper. These guys have just invaded Crimea. Why are we going to close bases in Europe? So to me, there was a big breakdown in terms of understanding the signal from the invasion of Georgia. And then in the years following it, um, very quickly doing things that we're doing now, we should have done then, to ready the alliance to deter Russia. And then when Crimea happened, we should have been there and there with both feet, and we were not. So I believe very strongly that both administrations were not as tough as they should have been.
Well, so I promise you this will be my last question, but I have to ask. I mean, so you were part of that administration. Why do you think your message didn't resonate maybe further, up at the top?
Well, one would be I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, so that's not in the room where it happens. That's in the room where the briefing books are done. I was very vocal about this. I was told at one time, a boss said, I've got bigger things to worry about than Russia. There was a feeling that Russia was a second-rate country. There was a feeling they couldn't do anything. We were also concerned about China. Remember, this was the pivot to China. This was and we were pivoting away from all of this. I think personally, I think I was seen as a cold warrior. I was older than most of the people there, and so I was seen as a cold warrior and someone who wasn't in with the high tech that we were going to be able to take care of the Russians with one arm tied behind our back. But I had the Balts in my office all the time. I had the polls. I had more than enough evidence coming in from the countries I was working with that this was a big deal. And finally, it took Crimea and it took getting the allies together at the Wales summit to begin to develop rapid reaction forces, to begin to understand that we needed to, and it was I was able to use that, and I fought a couple of action packages up to the president to stop some of the pullback of U.S. forces. And I remember one case where we fought and lost the pullback of attack helicopter brigade. They were pulled one day. They were pulled out of Germany. And then the next day, we had to find a replacement for them after all, because we needed them because of what the Russians had done. So it was right in this seam of pulling forces out of Europe because of the financial crunch and things like that. And then the Russians did what they did, and then trying to put forces back into Europe. I was able to do a lot of I told you so's, but I'm not sure that was well received.
Well, Jim, thank you so much. This has been a really fascinating conversation. It's been great speaking to you about all this potpourri of issues.
Well, it's my pleasure to revisit those days, but also to talk about the present, because they are all linked. Seeds were planted in the 1990s that are flourishing right now in Europe, as well as with Iran and everything else too. So the past is prologue.